This is your daily real estate syndication show. I'm your host, Whitney Sewell. Today, we've packed a number of shows together to give you some highlights. I know you're going to enjoy the show. Thank you for being with us today.
Our guest is Blake Dailey. Thanks for being on the show, Blake.
Hey, it's awesome to be here. Whitney, the first deal we bought was a house hack, and we rented the extra unit out with Airbnb. So I saw that as a strategy we could gain higher cash flow, and we're in a good market for it. And then when we did our first BRRRR, this is my wife and I, we did all the work ourselves. Stayed up till midnight, 2 weeks straight doing this rehab. And this had 2 units and a pool. So we created this this is our first BRRRR'nb, and I like put that name to it. It's the BRRRR with Airbnb at the end, and you just rent it as a short-term rental. And this house, because it had the 2 units, we created 3 listings. So we had the main house, the guest house, and then the third listing would be the whole place together. So you could rent it for big groups, and it had a pool. I mean, really good looking property in a good area, close to the beach and all that. Close-ish.
But that wasn't the one you were house hacking, right? Or it was?
No, this is the second one. So now At this point, we've got 3 short-term rental units, cash flowing really well. And then in the mid 2019, we added 4 more. So now we're up to 7. And that once we got to that point, we're up in cash flowing, the listings are running. And now that is surpassed my W-2 income as a Air Force officer. So in pretty short amount of time with a low number of units, you could say 7 units and 3 long-term units right now. We're at our, financial freedom number, which has replaced my W-2 income. So pretty quick there.
Congratulations, by the way. That's incredible.
Yeah, thank you.
I mean, it is. It's incredible. It's what most are dreaming of. We all did at one time, if you're not already there. And I know that didn't come, without a lot of hard work. I appreciate you saying you and your wife, did that first BRRRR, you did it together. And can you just shine a light into that a little bit of you and your spouse doing this together? I'm sure it wasn't always easy. Were you always on the same page? Was her
Absolutely
vision
not.
the same as yours? Tell us a little about that.
Yeah. So we were kind of like opposites, and I brought her into this. I really drug her into it. During this whole time, she's been getting her doctorate. She just graduated in December with her doctorate in physical therapy. So while we were grinding to build up this portfolio, she was also grinding to get her doctorate. So, a lot of credit to her for allowing me to do this. But yeah, I think that has been a struggle and like a area of conflict for us. And we've been dealing with it better, but it's definitely just trying to support each other. And she's been great, and I should be better to support her more. But yeah, I think starting out is just showing her like this vision of where we could get if we, got this number of properties and got this number of cash flow, and on and on and on, and just trying to show her that. But her whole thing was, I didn't go to school for real estate, so always an uphill battle. And we're still trying to figure out how to do it now. But now that we have kind of more systems in place and have the managers, it's a lot easier on us, and she can focus on her thing now as well.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. I love hearing, just some of the real stories behind some of that, because I lived that myself, and my wife has just been amazingly supportive. It's been amazing, but I know, you have to kind of paint that picture for.
Yeah, we definitely don't deserve our wives, it sounds like.
That's for sure. No doubt about that. But, house hacking, and doing the first BRRRR with her, just congratulations to you both, and just making that happen. Because obviously she had nothing going on while getting her doctorate, right? She wasn't busy at all.
Yeah, she had nothing but free time.
Right. So how quick then did you, get enough properties or, close on enough deals to gain that financial freedom number? And then I want us to talk about just your path then, from that to, syndicating. But go ahead.
Yeah. So we closed our first deal, the first house hack in July of 2019. And this was at the end of July, and like by the first week of August of 2020. So really like 12 and a half months, whatever. We had all the properties up and running, all the new Airbnbs up and running, and cash flowing, guests coming in, Airbnb payouts coming. So really 12 months. And that sounds like a short amount of time, but I can attest it was a long 12 months. There's a lot of late nights, a lot of early mornings, and a lot of work went into it, like probably 90-hour weeks. And that's not the path for everybody, but it's just what I wanted to do. And I had this goal and wanted to get there.
How many units was that?
In those 12 months, that was 11 units. 7 of them were short-term. 3 of them were long-term, and 1 we're living in. Yep. And then from there, we started, really kind of before that, in kind of about the time that you came on that show, like on the mastermind, is probably March, April timeframe, kind of when COVID hit, I kind of reevaluated the business, all the time that I was spending doing my real estate tasks, all the time it took me to close these deals, and all the time I was spending on maintenance on all my properties across the county now. And it was just taking me a lot of time. I saw a lot of inefficiencies there. And through that, kind of had this realization that I could do less work by focusing on less transactions. And I was wholesaling as well. So, I mean, the high volume kind of stuff. And because of that, I saw commercial multifamily as a way to do less transactions, have bigger payouts, and have the time reward be more, and just economies of scale. Really, I mean, you hear that all the time in commercial multifamily. It's scalable, and there's efficiencies built in. So I started getting into that.
Go ahead. Finish that.
I was just going to say that's where I started self-educating and putting the systems in place that once all those deals wrapped up, and, that March in that August timeframe, focused a lot more time to the commercial multifamily. And that's what led me to syndicating my first deal now.
Why not continue doing short-term rentals just like you've been doing since it was so successful?
Yeah, so that's a question I've asked myself, and it's been kind of this internal conflict. And now it's because I do really like the strategy, and the market that I'm in is really great for it. And I'm actually doing another one right now. I got a 8 unit that I was supposed to close on Monday, but the seller's giving me a little headache. So we're dealing with that. But this is an 8 unit in Fort Walton Beach in a good area, trying to close on that. And that's going to be 8 Airbnb units, a big BRRRR'nb. So
that's
still
massive
focusing
when like 11 got you where you're at. I mean, and then you're going to like more than half that just in one deal.
Yeah. So I'm still doing both, because now for the BRRRR'nbs, and, especially in the local area, I have the systems in place. I have the property manager. I have the contractors, really everything I need now. So with syndicating, my role in this deal anyway has been more of a capital raiser, investor relations deal. So really, I'm not the day-to-day operator spending a bunch of time, but vetting the deal, bringing capital to it. So that's kind of allowed me to balance these two acquisitions that are really a week apart from each other now.
How'd you finance all the short-term rentals?
So for the short-term rentals, like I was saying, is like every way of creative finance you could think of. So we have used hard money, we've used private money, we used seller financing. Really anything at our disposal. I read Brandon Turner's book, the book on investing with low and no money down, and I've done like every one out of there except a loan assumption. So from the very beginning, I knew my own capital was going to be an issue. So the goal then became to find really good deals so that I could find private or hard money, one of those creative solutions, and then BRRRR the money out, give the investors their return back, and then I'm holding on to the property with, fresh debt on it that's in my name, cash flowing.
Nice. No, that's awesome. And then, I mean, everybody wonders, right? Because that's one of the difficult parts is getting financing for that many deals. And so moving forward with the short-term rentals, as the financing changed at all, or has that gotten easier? What does that look like? I know that's a common question. It's like we want to get to syndication. However, it's hard to get started and gain that financial number like you have. Yeah,
absolutely. That's a really good question, because that's a question I get from other people trying to do this strategy too, is like, how do I get financing? I can't get a bank, Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac won't loan on short-term rentals. So what I've done to overcome that is I have a local community bank or credit union that does commercial loans in-house. They have portfolio loans in-house. So then it's, my loan gets submitted to the person that I've been talking to, I have the relationship with, they know my business, they know what I do, and they've seen kind of my track record of doing deals. So by finding that local bank that does commercial loans, I've been able to overcome that. And then as I've talked to other people, they've been able to do the same thing and set up that kind of financing. So I think in the beginning, to get to that number and to find really good financing, especially if you can create the relationship, is with local banks.
What about managing? Are you self-managing these, or are you hiring that out?
So I started out that way, and me and my wife did up to 3 ourselves, and we had the systems in place. We're using all the, management tools and doing well at it, but still there's that ongoing guest communication and just involvement that me working full time and, spending equal amount of time investing just didn't have the time to. So we kind of learned everything that we wanted by self-managing, and then handed it off to a property manager, I think in September.
Is that someone that's specific to short-term rentals, or is that just like a local manager who's used to
they're specific.
Smaller residential.
Yeah, they're specific to short-term rentals. I'm actually changing right now to a local manager. The one I was using was out of the market, but had the systems to manage everything. And I had my cleaners already. So we just paired those two. But the cleaner I'm switching to now is more specialized to this market, has the systems and the people in place for me to be kind of more hands-off and oversight rather than in the day-to-day.
Alex, welcome to the show. You are one of very few short-term rental people I've had on the show who are actually syndicating short-term rental projects and developing I would consider pretty large, short-term rental properties. I think it's a very unique business model that you have. I'm looking forward to getting into that. I want to ask you, why short-term rentals, versus, I guess, why did you start to focus on short-term rentals? Not like this moment as far as in the market cycle and everybody focusing on short-term, like you just said, but why did you gravitate in the beginning to short-term rentals versus, say, buying that triplex, fourplex with your with your VA loan and just renting them out long-term? What was that about short-term rentals for you?
Right. So we have just looking behind you, we have a lot of similar books on our bookshelves in terms of
we do. I can see them on yours.
and like with real estate too. So I sat down and probably read, I don't know, but at that time, like at this point, I probably read like over 100 real estate books. But at that time, maybe about 30 or 40 real estate books. And I mean, only one of them was geared towards short-term rentals because there wasn't really too much information out there on them. But what I realized was like reading the multifamily books, reading the flipping books, reading the single family house long-term rental books, the cash flows were like you're lucky to get anywhere between $300 to $600 cash flow per property. And what I was seeing on the back end of like some of these people who I was reaching out to, the types of cash flows they were getting, it wasn't even close. It was like owning 5 to 10 single family houses compared to owning one cabin. So that's when I looked at my goals and where I wanted to be at that time, I was like, the way to fast track that is through short-term rentals. And that, I think that is why so many people have gravitated towards it in the last 3 years, is because they've realized how much these short-term rentals can actually make, especially the unique ones, like the ones that are cabins, A-frames, or some type of that are unique in terms of like this, the design, if they're like condos or something. So people have, the cat's out of the bag, like they cash flow phenomenally. And that's what, and right now it's like with there being like a shortage of inventory and blah, blah, blah. And a lot of people coming from like the long-term rental side who are saying, hey, I just want like a 10% cap rate. I'll be happy with that. And I think that's why prices have been driven up a little bit, but yeah, just the cash flow.
Okay. No, so it was really that simple. I mean, ultimately you notice just more cash flow, but tell me about then the process of just the being able to scale it, right? I mean, it sounds like I don't know too many people, or maybe anybody that I can think of right off that's scaled the short-term rental business where they're developing a $10+ million project, right? Around short-term rentals. Speak to. It's interesting that your first project was a development. And maybe you can start there. Maybe some. Why was the first project a development, and how did you know that was something you could tackle to where you're scale, and then move into scaling to syndicating these same types of deals?
Yeah, I didn't want to purchase a property that was just a normal house that I could just put on the short-term rental sites, which still do pretty well right now. And all the properties that were either cabins or something unique about them that would do well as a short-term rental, they were just way too expensive compared to, I had a builder friend who ended up building my first project. We had like just figured out like price per square foot and everything. And our first project was an A-frame, and it was like a 900 square foot A-frame that grossed like 81,000 last year and then netted like 50 grand. So yeah, it's just, that's sort of why I gravitated towards the development side was that it was like, at the time we could build them cheaper. And even right now, it's obviously things have gotten way more expensive with COVID and stuff, with like both labor and cost of materials, but there's no inventory for short-term rentals right now, at least in the hot market. So it still makes sense to develop the short-term rentals over just purchasing.
Even that first project, or even to now, but especially that first one, how did you know or have confidence in what the land was, the value of the land was, and to that, knowing that, hey, we can go build something, with things that are happening with materials and material costs or shortages, where did that confidence come from to say, you know what, I am going to buy this land and we're going to move forward with developing this?
Yeah, so my first one was around like 2017, when I started looking for the land. Um, I lean pretty heavily on my real estate agent and this is what I always tell people is figure out like what an acre goes for in your area. We're developing in more rural areas, maybe about 15, 20 minutes away from the city, but we also live in an area that people are used to driving. So like it's a drive-in city, our airport's not really that big. So they're comfortable making that drive, especially like we're known for like hiking trails and waterfalls and stuff. So people are used to driving 45 minutes to an hour to even get to these locations. But yeah, figuring out price per acre is a big thing, starting off, and then figuring out like price per square foot with your builder, and then from there just this. I keep saying unique properties, but like unique properties is what's going to market your property very easily on the short-term rental site. So I say Instagrammable properties is what you want, like people who are excited to stay in your house, where it's not just a place that they're sleeping, where the property is an experience in and itself outside of like the city that they're visiting to.
Nice. That's something to think about right there. Instagrammable property,
Yeah,
but the unique
Instagrammable
property experience, I like that versus just the surrounding, the things that you can't change. Really, you can change that property. So you mentioned you started driving around, you're looking at 30, 40 properties or more, just to buy one, but there's really this, like best use of time issue, right? What is the best use of time? How did that change? Like, how did you change that to where you're not driving around looking at 50 properties to buy one? What happened there?
One was, I mean, I got a real estate development mentor to sort of help me really focus in on what my goals need to be, or where I need to be, or what I need to be doing right now to where I need to be at maybe in a couple of years. And when you start purchasing some of these larger parcels, I mean, there aren't as many of those on the market as say like maybe 1 to 5 acres. So like, I mean, take for instance, like there would probably be at any given time 300 to 400 of those like acre to 5 acre parcels on the market, compared to like where we're purchasing anywhere between 40 to 100 acres right now. There's only maybe like 60 of those on the market. So a lot of the times I won't even drive out to the property without doing my research on the computer. And what that looks like is we live in the mountains, where we operate in the mountains. So we're looking at how steep the land is through our county website. And then they have certain parameters that determine if we're going to be in something called a steep slope ordinance or a protected ridge ordinance that we usually don't build in, because it takes way more time to get extra permits. And then it also costs more to like beef up the foundation when we're building at a certain elevation. So that's one way to completely like just decide if I'm even going to drive out to the property. And another thing too is making sure for people who are actually wanting to do this themselves, or if they're looking to purchase property, is the drive up to the property is very important. You don't want your guests to be driving 20, 30 minutes down a gravel road. And you might see a listing and you're like, this is absolutely beautiful. Like, why is it priced at way below market or whatever? More than likely, it's probably going to be the drive, because you don't want your guests to be annoyed by the time they even get to your property. A lot of times they're driving in at night. It's going to be a new area that they're not used to. And so that's, once I decide to go out and look at a property, that's the first thing on my mind is like, what's the guest going to be thinking about as they're driving to this property? So a way to fix that is just to invest in property that's off of like a double lane state maintained road, a paved state maintained road. And then you can put in your own road. Like we'll put in anywhere between like 1/4 mile to 1/2 mile of road to get to the house.
Nice. No, that's some great things to think about. And I want to get into some of those specifics in a moment too, about just short-term rentals, some tips that you have. But can you share an example of a deal you're syndicating, maybe, or some things that to consider? Maybe the listeners thinking about syndicating, some type of short-term rental, or this is intriguing them. Speak to maybe a current project or a past project that you syndicated and what that looks like. The type of land, maybe in the what type of buildings are you putting on there, homes, or what are you building?
Yeah, I mean, just like for the people who are listening, just like on the syndication side and raising money for development in general, like just understanding that there is more risk involved, like especially with coming out of COVID now, or at least like things settling down a little bit, where like things can go wrong. Like there is more risk there, but there is more reward. That's why we're doing what we're doing. But when it comes to the syndication side, I mean, we're raising the capital just like a normal syndication. And I've leaned pretty heavily on the multifamily model to establish what we're doing here. But like our very first, like, I guess, larger joint venture that we did was it was a $2 million project. 6 cabins right next to each other, and where the investors had put up almost all the capital. And it was just a trust thing. I'm just with multifamily or anything, it's just making sure that your investors trust you, that even if they're accredited, just making sure that they understand the process up front, that that you need to understand the process. And that comes from like if you need to get a specific permit with the county, like we needed a specific vacation rental complex permit with our county. That took about 3 months. So just really really making sure that you understand what your county or city requires for short-term rentals. That's probably the most important thing when it comes to syndicating deals like this. It's just, just being upfront with your investors and telling them, hey, like it's going to take this long to develop these projects. Are you comfortable with that? Like having your money tied up there.
Yeah.
It's not like a multifamily project where it probably will cash flow right out of the bat if you're not doing any rehab work, or even if you're updating some of the units, most of the units are still rented out or something. So it's not like hitting the ground running with stuff like that. And we do invest in properties where like it'll be like a cabin and maybe there's like 10 to 15 acres attached to it, where we'll maybe have plans to develop another 10 cabins next to it. That is more like a break even thing, where like we do break even on the holding costs for the whole development project. Like I said before we started this interview, it's very creative, and every project's going to be different that we do with our investors. So
yeah, no, it's just such an interesting model. You mentioned like maybe only 60 properties like that on the market. That's what did you say, 40 to 100 acres roughly? I mean, is that like nationwide? Is that like in a certain area that you're looking?
Yeah, that's within our county.
Oh, in your county. Okay.
Yeah, in our county. Yeah, which is still a lot. I mean, that's a good number but again, like I would say 70% of them are in that steep slope ordinance that we were talking about. And then we also have plans on getting the beauty about the mountains is you can drive an hour in any direction and you're in a completely different market. Like hour and a half to us is like Pigeon Forge, Gatlinburg, the Smoky Mountains and stuff. So we do have plans on getting into other markets that I've identified that I believe are up and coming. Asheville's very competitive right now in terms of both properties and land. But yeah, we do have plans on getting into other like mountain markets that are within hour and a half to us, which I mean, there's probably about 10 of them. And then I've looked at 2 of them that I've decided to go into. So.
Okay, awesome.
Yeah.
Speak to maybe the market selection there. How do you know that it's a market that you're willing to, go buy, 100 acres in and start a development for short-term rentals?
Yeah, I forgot where I heard of it, but people like views and people like being up top. Like they like being high. Like say like in New York, like you go to a skyrise and you like looking down and like looking at like a scenic view. So you want to invest in a market that's pretty scenic. I've realized mountain communities, and this may be excluding the West Coast, but mountain communities, mountain cities are a little bit less seasonal than say like beach towns. Beach towns, like say like if you're looking at the coast in North Carolina, like in the Outer Banks, that's a little bit more seasonal. And say like here in the mountains, we're a year-round market. We have our high season, which is going to be later summer, and then the foliage or the leaf season in October, November. But for the most part, like we cash flow pretty good throughout the whole year. So mountain communities, you want there's like 3 steps. It's like you want to be in a cabin when you're in the woods. You want a hot tub and you want a mountain view. And that's sort of the 3 things that we look for. So it's like, obviously hot tubs are pretty easy, but the design of the property and then also some sort of scenic view. One thing I always tell people that ask me that question is you want a foolproof way, honestly, is to invest in areas that are close to a national forest or a national park, because you already have a built-in audience that are already visiting these parks. Like, I mean, with COVID, like the national parks saw like record numbers in the last couple of years. Like I think that Smoky Mountains alone saw like 20 million visitors. So there's a shortage of inventory there in terms of like where people want to stay at. They might be staying in a boring hotel just to be able to stay in the Smoky Mountains. So that's probably the quickest way to answer that question, is looking at markets that are close to national forests or national parks.
Thank you for being with us again today. I hope that you have learned a lot from the show. Don't forget to like and subscribe. I hope you're telling your friends about the Real Estate Syndication Show and how they can also build wealth in real estate. You can also go to lifebridgecapital.com and start investing today.